This lesson in understanding workbooks and worksheets puts us in our workbook, Lesson 01, Introducing Excel. It's important to understand the difference between a workbook and a worksheet. A workbook refers to the actual name of the file. Up above we see here Lesson 01, Introducing Excel. That is the name of the workbook. It is the file, and it has an extension .xls or .xlsx. Every workbook has at least a couple of worksheets, and by default, Excel always creates at least one blank worksheet when you open up a new workbook. Let's take a look now by clicking on File, New, and we'll choose Blank Workbook. Here's a blank workbook, and you see it has one blank worksheet down below. You can imagine the analogy as having a book with no sheets in it would be rather useless. A book with lots of sheets would be even more useful. And typically, you will see more than one worksheet inside of a workbook. We'll learn later how we can change the names, and we can color them, and we can even delete them and move them around in different order. Each sheet is made up of columns going right to left and rows going up and down. The columns are alphabetical, A, B, C, D, E, etc. And the rows, as you see, are numbers starting with 1 and going down. As I click in each cell, it highlights the row and the column that I'm in, giving me the address. For instance, clicking here, it highlights this cell in a dark green border. Then there's a light gray outline up above on the E column and on the number 6 row. An easy way to see what the address is of the cell that is selected is to look in the name box. So over to the left, near the top, we see the name box. And the name box shows me the address E6. This also reminds me that I always use the alphabet letter first. So this is E6, and it would never be referred to as 6E. By simply clicking around in a worksheet, you can start getting very familiar by looking over at the name box to see where you are. Over time, this will become second nature to know the address you're in by either quickly glancing at your column header or at your row header to see what is highlighted, or quickly glancing over at your name box to see what your address is. As mentioned before in a previous lesson, Excel is pretty extensive, and that's also true for how many rows and how many columns. Excel gives you a lot of room to work with. We see here columns A, B, C, D, and on my screen I'm able to see all the way over to Y. It might be different on your computer monitor. Well, if you're wondering how far you can go to the right, there's a keyboard shortcut that we mentioned earlier, and I want to reinforce now, and that's Control Arrow. So if I hold down my Control key and tap the right arrow, it'll take me to the very end of Excel. Well, the very end is XFD. Well, to understand that, let's go back again, hold down the Control key, and do the left arrow. It takes me all the way back to A. You'll see here that the alphabet goes A, B, C, D, etc. all the way till, I'm going to click here, and now just use my arrow keys without control. Just using my arrow keys, I can go to see the end of the alphabet at Z. After Z, we get AA, AB, AC, AD, and so forth. When we get to the end of that, we get BA, BB, BC, and so on, until we finally get to the very end. I'm going to use my Control key, Control right arrow, to take me to the very end. And here I see XFD, which adds up to about 16,000 columns. Well, what about our rows? On my computer monitor, I can see rows 1 through 35 currently. But how far down does it go? Well, I'm going to use my Control down arrow to go to the very bottom. And I see here I have over 1 million rows. Now that's a lot of space to work with. Don't let that overwhelm you. We obviously don't need to use all the columns or all the rows, but it's nice to know we have all the space we'll need to work in. There's one more shortcut command I want to talk about. Right now, 16,000 columns over and 1 million rows down. A way to quickly get all the way back to our home position, or A1, is to use the Control-Home key combination. So I'll hold down the Control key and I'll tap Home on my keyboard. And that takes me back to A1. So we learned that Excel has extensive amount of room for our information. We can go 16,000 columns and 1 million rows down. We also reinforce some of our shortcut keys, Control Arrow to move up and down and left and right very quickly, and also the key combination Control Home that moves us to A1. And don't forget to use your name box. This is a great way to see what the cell address is.